You are now tuned into Flipping the Birds, a Philly Sports Network podcast.
What's going on, Eagles fans? Welcome one, welcome all to another episode of Flipping the Birds.
He's into the end zone. Touchdown, Eagles.
What's going on, Eagles fans? Welcome one, welcome all to another episode of Flipping the Birds. I'm Brian Cameron alongside Zach Chavalella, Eric Reese. Before we dive into how we are actually feeling as possible analysts and fans, let's dive into how we feel personally in our personal lives. How are you guys feeling today on this Tuesday evening?
I'm fantastic because I am off the rest of the week.
Oh,
I am off
nice.
the rest of the week. So this is a just a nice vacation that I didn't ask for. It was just a part of our, school calendar.
Okay.
And I get treated, just like that. Like October is a fun time.
That sounds good. And how you feeling, Zach? I mean, you had a hell of a day today.
Yeah, I'm fine. I have unknowingly been denying myself water as penance for following this team the way that I do. I've since come to light about the matter. We are hydrating up, boys, and we are doing our best to be alive come the next Eagles game. So, we're moving.
That we are. I mean, we are. One could say that we are moving in a better direction than the Eagles. Before we get into the crazy stuff, right, that's out there. I mean, we have so many things to talk about. The Darius Slay nonsense. We have the Chauncey Gardner nonsense. We have the Nick Sirianni nonsense. Let's focus on the game. What the hell happened? Because we all were convinced that this was like a shoo-in win for them. They were going to walk out of Tampa, as the...
Hold on. You were convinced.
I did forget. Yes.
You were convinced
to lose.
Yeah, I chose a lot closer than what it was. I think I said, and you can review the tape, but 2017 Tampa.
That was respectable. I mean, that's what we, I would have respected that kind of score.
Yeah, right. Exactly. That prediction score would have been respectable.
I mean, does anybody know what the hell is going on? Because the roster's good. We know the roster's good, right? They got the names. I mean, they got a Saquon Barkley out there who we'll get into that. They're missing the two top wide receivers, which it's understandable. It sucks, but you gotta, still gotta pull through. They have Jalen Hurts. They have the Georgia Bulldogs on the defensive line. They have Quinion Mitchell. They have Darius Slay. They have C.J. Gardner-Johnson that every Eagles fan was saying that we should have re-signed him last year. And he's here, but he's not here. There's a lot of crap going on. So let's start with sides of the ball, right? Offensively, I think we were all expecting it to be a bit of a crapshoot. But not to that degree. I would have assumed that Nick Sirianni and Kellen Moore would have went into the game understanding that they are undermanned at wide receiver. There is no rapport there just yet with Jalen and Jahan and Johnny and Paris, John Ross, right? But with that thought in mind, you will go into the game run first. Like, this should have been the Saquon Barkley game where you built rhythm. You built tempo throughout the game and actually mastered that with Saquon Barkley. Like, I think he only had like 2 or 3 carries in the first half. How do you guys feel about their approach to this game with them being undermanned, with no A.J. Brown, no Lane Johnson, and no Devontae Smith, and no Brandon Covey for that?
Fundamentally terrible for all the reasons that you just mentioned. If you don't have a passing attack, you don't have even Devonta Smith, and you didn't have obviously A.J. Brown, and that's pretty much your passing attack on a game to game basis. To not deviate And let's just take a look real quick. 8.4 yards on average is what Barkley finishes with on the day. Understandably, there's a long run there that doesn't go the distance, but nonetheless a long yard that makes it for a long run that makes it for a ton of yardage. But you needed to be a run first team because you don't have a passing attack. That is first and foremost. That falls on Kellen Moore. I think that falls on the preparation of Nick Sirianni. You can just look at the box score and almost say, immediately to yourself, yeah, like it really is it totally on Hurts? Well, the turnover is for sure. But what can he do in the air at this point when Paris Campbell is pretty much your go-to guy in the form of a wide receiver? It's tough. It's tough sledding out there. That's part of the reason why I expected Tampa to win. But that's on the offensive side of the ball.
Okay, well, let's stick with that, right? So we'll go to Zach, and then we'll talk defense. Zach, I know you got a lot on your chest, so I'm not gonna pick on you today about your boy on the sidelines. How do you feel?
Are you kidding me?
Your distant cousin from.
Are you kidding me?
At this point, he's lost. He's lost everything. He can't go visit the motherland. He can't partake in making sauce. Like he's lost all that. Like,
can I put this in a scenario? If Sirianni and you were part of the Sopranos and you're Tony Soprano, what would you do with Sirianni?
Back long ago.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So for Nick Sirianni, right, and we've talked about this ad nauseum, and by ad nauseum I mean that I get nauseous when I talk to you. Just throughout the entire week about what exactly the issues are with the Eagles. And we've both agreed that there is a long list of issues. When you try to rank those, and who knows, I might actually do that for Philly Sports Network later on this week. But when you're looking at the reasons why, at the top, there's three things that I think you can rank them however you want. I have big pussy. Yeah. You guys don't know the show? You're going to talk about it? You don't know the show?
Oh, my God.
Watch The Sopranos. Just watch The Sopranos.
I know about it. I just didn't make the connection until you said big pussy, and I was like, oh.
I didn't say big. That was the problem.
I didn't expect Zach to just nonchalantly just drop that on the podcast.
Oh, it's the second time. I said it in an interview the other day. I was doing an interview for Metro Philadelphia, and we shout out band Mannequin Pussy because they came up, and that was a part of my official interview. Where was I? That all distracted me. So we have three things, right? There's three. Out the gate. Well, that's all the time we have for today, folks. We're gonna.
I hate this as a kid, Sirianni.
There's three big issues, right, with the Philadelphia Eagles. I mean, there's unending big issues, but put these three anywhere that you want, if you ask me. And that's Nick Sirianni, that's the play of Jalen Hurts right now, and that is the way that Howie Roseman has handled the construction of this defense, right? So let's take that bit by bit. Nick Sirianni, I don't care that he's not the guy calling plays except for fourth down. Like, first of all, the plays that are being called on fourth down and in clutch scenarios such as that have been particularly terrible. We've been very critical of those plays. So that's obviously an issue there. When you look around and say, well, this guy doesn't call plays, he's not an offensive coach, he's not a defensive coach right now, what does he exactly do? And you see players saying, oh, well, he's great in team meetings, he's a motivator, this, that, the other. Well, I mean, what's motivation without production? Like, how many weeks do we see this team going looking unprepared, unmotivated? And just what's the point of, when you get to a certain spot, like he's just clearly not performing, is what I'm seeing from Sirianni. Now, as far as Jalen Hurts is concerned, he can't continue to keep turning the ball over like he is. Now, I understand that he has marquee plays here and there that he is making that is helping this offense look as if it has life at some points here or there. But when the big moment comes up, he's turning the ball over. I think I saw a stat. It's like the last 7 games he has a turnover in. I could be wrong on that, but it was around that number there. And it's the point gets across either way. Like it's just horribly concerning when you're talking about your franchise quarterback that he continues to turn the ball over game after game after game. Philadelphia hasn't won the turnover battle, and I don't think since, easily last season, but it's been a long time since they won the turnover battle, and you're not going to win games like that. They're lucky they won against the Saints. They're lucky they won against the Packers. Like, especially the Packers, that's a good team in Green Bay. I don't know what led to that victory other than Saquon Barkley going nuclear, and then they proceeded to go away from him. Yes, Eric, you have a question.
Jaden Reed did not help the Eagles win. Stop.
Speaking of the Packers, since Tim made that trade, can we talk about – I'm just going to insert real quick. Look up fantasy points for Jaden Reed and Joe Mixon. Get back at me.
Do you mean my now superstar wide receiver, Jaden Reed? Is that who you're talking about?
Yeah, because he's just been tossed around by a bunch of people in a league who don't know anything about the Jaden Reed. It's incredible. It's incredible.
Helps,
you got
Eric,
so lucky because people have no idea. I'm over here just furious going, I saw that trade. I'm like, that's – you know what? Like I've complained enough about
we should keep trading Jaden Reed.
I'm gonna just back out the conversation. I backed out the conversation after that. I was like, dude, these trades are dirt, and I'm gonna leave it alone.
If it helps, Eric, I will not be trading Jaden Reed. I just turned down an offer involving him today. He is not on the block, and not only that, but I will not be taking off. So. I
would have too turned down both of those offers with Jaden Reed on my team. Damn you, Tim. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, so when you get past, Jalen Hurts and his consistent turnover issues and just it's not reading situations right. It's not just about not being able to read the defense, but it's not about reading situations as well. So when you get beyond those struggles, the third issue that Philadelphia is facing is, and this is the issue that can't really be fixed in season, and I'll get more onto that point in just a second, this roster construction on the defensive side, right? Obviously, between the defensive line, theoretically, you're set. You, again, theoretically have two young pillars of your defense in Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis, only one of which is really producing right now, and he's an interior defensive lineman. Like, they're just going to send the mob at him every single time and keep him from getting inside. So Jalen Carter is effectively being handcuffed. You have guys on the outside. Brandon Graham, who is roughly 103 years old, is your top productive pass rusher. Like, come on. With respect, he's playing amazing ball considering that. But listen, 103 and he's coming back next year. Like, that's the impressive, resume of Brandon Graham there. But you have no productive youth in that pass rush, and Jalen Carter would be included as productive youth, but he's not able to produce because he's getting double and triple teamed every single snap. There's no opportunity for him. So, for a situation like that obviously you have to look at Howie Roseman. You can look a little bit at the way that this defense is designed by Vic Fangio, but I think it's a little bit of a combination of things. I think that this defense isn't good enough to play. And how many years have we said that where there hasn't been, because they've been playing a Vic Fangio style for years. And it's always been, the personnel is just not enough.
I have a question about that. And
yeah,
this is truly a question. So correct me if my thinking on this is wrong. When Sirianni came in for the interview to be a head coach, he came in with a game plan of what he wanted to do on defense and offense. His game plan, from what we were told a long time ago, was he wanted to stop the long ball. He wanted to stop big plays, which it seems like break. Yes. So which it seems like that's what Gannon gave up, because we didn't see pressure in the secondary from Gannon because the quarterbacks were looking great against him. But we did see a good pass rush, which I'll touch on in a second. But then we saw that with Sean Desai. And then we're seeing that with Vic Fangio, where it's kind of like the whole bend but don't break mentality is still tied to what the head coach wants it to be. And listening to Vic today was kind of like him saying, like, this is what they want. Like, I'm doing what they want. You guys can't, I can't say much after that.
But isn't Fangio kind of the guy who, his defense was always that? Like, doesn't he kind of fit?
It is, which brings me to my next point. How dare you, Brian?
Aggressive.
How dare you try and make this a Sirianni point?
No.
This is Vic Fangio's defense. He's the freaking godfather of this style of defense.
I was just going to say the godfather, big pussy. I was going to say it.
This is Apu yelling at Professor Skinner.
Vic Fangio
because he wrote a book called Billy and the Clonosaurus when it's the same exact story as Jurassic Park. It was on the bestseller list for 9 months.
Vic Fangio's defense is relatively more aggressive than what we've seen so far, is what I'm trying to get across. You feel better
My
now?
lap's off. It's aggressive if you have players who can be aggressive, but who
You do,
can
though. You
be-
have a Quinion Mitchell. You have a Darius Slay. I wouldn't say Avante
You have
Maddox.
a Jurassic Park.
So you're talking about more press, more man on.
Yes, that's what I'm talking
right?
about.
Yeah.
The pass rush, I don't get why they're not
theoretically,
rotating guys like Jonathan Gannon did, which I feel like was brilliant. I know he had better depth, but at the same time, like he kept guys fresh.
So the situation where you find yourself playing off a bit more is if you have a defensive line that's not generating pressure, right? So that's the thought process with why they went ahead with that. Except the problem is that you had Baker Mayfield adapt fairly quickly. And then the Eagles proceeded to not adapt for the rest of the game. That's the major issue there. So when you have that kind of situation, you would think, all right, well, let me adapt back, to what traditionally Vic Fangio's defense is. But that's the only type of adaptation that you can really see in game or from week to week. You're not going to see them all of a sudden start playing, completely unversed, unpracticed defensive schemes, formations. Like they're not going to be like pulling out the surprise, bag of tricks out just in a week 4 performance. So the issue remains the fact that more than anything else, and I don't think that Vic Fangio is free of blame. These players as individuals are surely not free of blame. Howie Roseman is definitely culpable in this situation. There was a lot of not caring enough about positions of extreme importance. Once again, we're talking about linebackers. We're talking about the pass rush now and I get the Hassan Reddick situation was tough, but the problem is that you did not bring in a player who can replace him. You can say what you want about what Bryce Huff did last season, but it was in a completely different role. You did not talk to your defensive coordinator about guys that he likes to use. And I hate to say that this is a good point by you, Brian. I'm hoping that it wasn't you who actually said this. But you look at Bryce Huff, and he's not a guy who plays that Vic Fangio style pass rusher.
I missed it in the chat.
That outside linebacker. He's strictly a pass rusher. Now, you can't move him inside, obviously, because he's so small. You can't even effectively make him put his hand in the dirt, every single time and run, the opposite guy in coverage, because that's how you get Nolan Smith in coverage. That's how you get Josh Sweat in coverage. And these are things that you frankly cannot do. So what does it come down to at the end of the day? Howie Roseman did not make enough or the right moves this past offseason. So now, just to finish up my very long point on the offense here, you get to how do you solve these 3 issues?
We're still talking about offense.
We're still talking about offense. We haven't even gotten to defense.
No, it's a good point.
But when you look at these 3 issues and what can you solve as soon as possible, what can you solve? Well, you can't technically solve a personnel issue. You can maybe add a guy to help improve the personnel, and I would certainly hope that Philadelphia looks to do that between now and the trade deadline, but you cannot completely address the personnel issue. You do not have, whether it is the assets, the ability, the availability of free agents or possible trade targets, you don't have that same kind of fluidity of a situation that you do in the offseason. When you get to the quarterback, Jalen Hurts is your quarterback. You're not just going to go out there and start Tanner McKee. You're not just going to go out there and start, Kenny Pickett. That's not going to happen. And you're paying Jalen Hurts so much money that you're not going to, do something that crazy like you'd see in an NBA season and trade a guy mid-year. That's not going to happen either with a guy like Jalen Hurts. So when you get down to Nick Sirianni, and this is where it gets really tough as well, there's not a perfect answer to do mid-season. Firing a coach mid-season is not something that good teams do. However, as we have seen, continuing to employ Nick Sirianni as a head coach does not make you a good team either. This offseason, there was a lot of concern, general heats under Nick Sirianni's seat. And shockingly to a lot of people, he kept his job. And the results are not paying off. I don't care what players have to say about how much they like him. It's clear they don't respect him enough to play hard for him. So that's the issue that we're having. We're having corners who are afraid to tackle and posting on social media right after the game. We're having special teams players who are openly admitting that they do not know the rules of how to play special teams. You have guys tackling their own teammates left and right. There's no excuse for what we've seen. And on top of that, You bring in a guy like Kellen Moore with the excuse that, well, with his offense, with this wonderkin, we're going to be able to see some evolution and some potential sought out from Jalen Hurts. We're going to be able to see, some notable change. And you're not, because it's the same offense, just with a bit more pre-snap motion. And it's utterly ridiculous. If you look at the game consistently week to week, you may have 1 week where the route tree looks a little more diverse for a guy here or a guy there. But consistently, you can look at the situation, and I understand that he did not have his top receivers. I frankly do not care, because who he did have was Dallas Goedert and Saquon Barkley, who a lot of teams would love to have a guy like, of either of those guys. And they were both underutilized.
My thing about that last point there about having Dallas Goedert and Barkley is it allows teams, and Tampa Bay is already a defensively sound team, but we were, and by we, obviously Philadelphia, were defensively sound in a game where it was easy to lock on and focus on an aspect or player of the game. The Saints, that was our best defensive game, and it was basically stop Kamara. Okay, so without receivers, you're just limiting the few times, or I don't know, how many times you're sending a tight end on a route because you're running the ball at times. And you're also saying, just focus on Barkley. And Barkley still got his, which is irritating as hell, because when you look at that and you're dumbing it down to the point where defenses is literally just focused on what weapons you have, then you have to look at that and how fantastic Barkley was still doing on the ground, and say, all right, we're going to be a run team. We have to be a run team. You got to figure that. That's your identity. You have a big identity crisis everybody wants to talk about in Philadelphia. Run the ball when you literally don't have passing options. It's not hard. And by the way, the fact that it's not hard, and the fact that I'm able to call it out, and I've never coached anything, come on, what are we doing here?
And this is not a defense of Sirianni in any shape or form, or Kellen Moore, or whoever holding the keys to the offense that you want to claim. Big Dom, I don't even care. But when you are talking about completely transforming an offense, that's something that you don't see happen week to week. But when you bring in a guy like Saquon Barkley in the offseason, and you don't make, effectively, whatever you want to call it, situational playbooks, I mean, even the early game scripting, if you don't utilize your marquee offensive player, I mean, A.J. Brown's the only guy, and you could say Lane Johnson if you're talking non-skill. A.J. Johnson is the only guy who can compete with Saquon Barkley for best offensive player on this team.
But you're going to see A.J. Brown get his
A.J. Brown,
because you're going to see A.J. Brown get his touches.
A.J. Brown.
When he's back in, because that's Sirianni's preference.
I have not had water today. Bear with me.
You're good. You've been fantastic on your lack of water, sir.
I've been doing all this. I hear a mermaid in the background. I'm losing it, but I'm pulling through as best I can. So
Sirianni's preference is to get the wide receivers into the game, to make the wide receivers the spectacle of the offense, which has been the bread and butter for them, right? But when it comes to the run game, which you alluded to, you have Saquon Barkley back there. You both mentioned this. You have Saquon Barkley. That's the sentence in itself, right? This has been an ongoing issue for the Eagles since we lost LaShawn McCoy. Yes. When we had LeGarrette Blount in that Super Bowl season, the fans had to demand for the Eagles to run the ball to have a good offense, and they did it, right? We saw them, LeGarrette, Darren, before he got injured. We saw Corey Clement step up. We saw Kenyon Barner. We saw these guys do things that we expected them to do because it's how the offense should have been ran. Last year, DeAndre Swift losing snaps to Kenny Gainwell. Kenny Gainwell was not a main back. Every year, it seems like they're so focused on making sure that their QB is the end-all, be-all of their offense. And exactly like this is not just a Sirianni issue. This starts at the top. The very, 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 very top of the mountain, where the air is so thin that very few can go up there and actually breathe the same air as this man, Jeffrey Lurie. This starts with him. It's his team. It's how he wants things to be ran. If he wants his QB to have the stats of all-time QBs, his QB is going to be forced to have that, which we saw with Carson Wentz, and it failed. Jalen Hurts isn't that guy, but Jalen Hurts is a hell of a playmaker. He's a hell of a leader. He's a hell of a player. And we've seen what he can do at his peak. Now, you've given him the most elusive weapon that I feel like he's ever had behind him in Saquon Barkley. And it's not just Sirianni failing the team. It's not just Howie Roseman failing the team. It's not Big Dom and the Mafia that's failing the team. It's truly Jeffrey Lurie at this point, and I'm completely on that wagon.
So
the
Richie's,
one point that I want to
question-
bring up.
I'm sorry, Zach, just real quick to Richie's question down there. When was the last time the Eagles ran a trick play? I believe it was the fake out, like fake pitch or whatever on the push, and it was awful.
Which was one of the worst play designs that I have ever seen.
That's a Nick Sirianni special. What do you mean?
You could have, hey, whatever. I don't, I'm just saying that at the end of the day, 8.4 yards a carry average for Saquon Barkley. You could have pushed right after that and got a first down every step of the way.
He was a league-leading rusher entering the game, and now he's being fourth. Why are you not using your best weapon?
I mean, you're not allowed to run Saquon Barkley on third downs and in the red zone. That's just league rules, apparently. Isn't that why he's not been utilized on third downs and in the red zone?
Yeah, the math was a math.
I think they changed them and no one called on. I think they changed them and no one called on, just like the special team. So,
well, when we're talking about schematically, like how to formulate your offense, you look at teams like Detroit, obviously a run-heavy team, and I get it. They don't have a dual threat quarterback, or wait, is he? If you watched the game last night, but they don't have a Jalen Hurts style QB. I get that, and yet even still, they have two above starting level caliber running backs who they unleash on the other team. And then you look and you have guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown, and I get he started off slow this year, but Sam Laporta, who have success with this team. Jameson Williams has seen some success this year. How are they able to do it? You look at the New Orleans Saints, who have seen an offensive renaissance, albeit not against the Philadelphia Eagles somehow, but other than that, and you're watching guys like Alvin Kamara, who are exceeding not only – this is a guy who, like Saquon Barkley, is a threat as a rusher and as a pass catcher out of the backfield. You're looking at guys like Chris Olave, who's been getting utilized a lot more and more. You're looking at guys like Rashid Shaheed, who had a great start to the year as well. Like New Orleans doesn't have a problem with this. Detroit doesn't have a problem with this. San Francisco historically has not had a problem with this. I mean, you want to talk about bringing in your own Christian McCaffrey, which was some of the verbiage that was tossed around, was the comparison to Barkley and CMC about how Barkley is the only back close enough to CMC in terms of he's an elite rusher, he's an elite pass catcher, he can pass block, everything. He's a complete package of a running back. You have all these comparisons throughout the offseason, and yet you're not even, and I get that they don't necessarily have that. I think you can use Devontae Smith for this, but they don't necessarily have that kind of gadget wide receiver. But you look at prime San Francisco, and Christian McCaffrey was eaten, Brandon Ayuk was eaten, Deebo Samuel was eaten.
Even George
What
Kittle.
was the problem? And George Kittle.
Here's the difference between all those teams in Philadelphia. It's the Howie Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie show here, and it's very evident. They won that Super Bowl, and they won it their way, and they're like, hey, our way works. We got to do this. None of those, Brock Purdy was allowed to develop within the offense. Jared Goff allowed to develop within the offense. Jalen Hurts has not been allowed to develop at all because this offense has been as inconsistent as can be. We don't know what the hell is being ran, to be honest. It seems like it's just verticals on almost every single play even when AJ Brown's not in there. They're not running an offense.
How many points have the Eagles scored on in the first quarter this season?
None.
I'll need that.
How many yards did they have in the first quarter against the freaking Bucs?
How many first downs did they have throughout most of the first half? At some point it was egregious to none. That's the point.
What's the definition of insanity?
A lot. And there's a lot of definitions right now. It's the Philadelphia Eagles, probably. So it's a lot of definitions. For a long time in my world, it was Chuck Fletcher. So, as the old GM of the Flyers, but now in this world that we're in doing this podcast, it's just, everything really.
It doesn't seem like they want to control the tempo of games. They want to control the points on a scoreboard more than they want to control the game. And at the end of the day, you can put up as many points as you want, but if the other team is catching up because your defense is on the field so much, I mean, they happened in Chip Kelly era. Like
That was just going to say that. That was the whole
was the
point of
same
the reason
thing.
why Chip Kelly was a gimmick and didn't work.
Exactly. Like you got to run the ball. You got to control tempo, control the time of possession. You have Saquon Barkley. He should be getting the ball on first down. There's no question about it. If AJ Brown and Devontae Smith are not playing, Saquon should get the ball at least 2 or 3 times in that first drive. And if it's 3 and out, it's 3 and out. You tried it, then you switch it up. But you can't go pass all the time. Like this, it's not working.
It's not even just about the running back, though. It's about the offensive line, too. Offensive linemen prefer running the ball.
Yes.
Like they prefer to move forward. They prefer to attack, not to defend. So you're not getting these offensive linemen into that groove. You're not giving them that sorts of confidence in their own strength and ability. You're not setting them up for success. And it's an effect on everybody. You're not giving Jalen Hurts the confidence that this offense can move early on. You're not giving Saquon Barkley the opportunity to get into his comfort zone. I mean, even going back to the Green Bay game, and I get the field was a big part of that. How did he start that game? How did he finish that game? Completely night and day, right? And that's not unusual for running backs. A lot of running backs, especially some of the better ones, get comfortable as the game goes on, right?
That's the point
as
of
they wear down the opposition. And tacklers get sore. Tacklers get tired. Defenders are tired of defending the run. You find that with most every single team. So you're doing all of this, and by this, I mean continuing to just throw the ball and hope somebody catches it, whether you're putting out A.J. Brown, who obviously I can understand why you'd be attracted to that idea, or if you're putting out Paris Campbell, no offense to him, who was just brought up from the practice squad, right? There's levels to it. You cannot expect to have the same level of success no matter who you're putting out there. And so you need to prepare for that median opportunity, right? And not saying that you have to fixate your offense based on the thought that you might lose somebody to injury, but you have to prepare in case something's not working. You have to make your offense flexible so that you can adjust during the game. And that's what Philadelphia has not done. And that's why Philadelphia continues to struggle. I believe they are what? Is it 3 and I want to say 8? Yeah, 3 and 8
in the last 11 games.
It's unserious. It's unserious, and it's an insult to Philadelphia.
Speaking of unserious, and I want to get your takes on this. I'm trying my best to not bash Nick Sirianni because to Zach's point that he's alluded to me many times this weekend, I've gotten yelled at, I've gotten put in the corner and everything about this. It's not only Nick Sirianni, right? But this portion, I feel like, is on Nick Sirianni. If I have to hear after one more press conference that the team was unprepared and that's his fault,
yes,
I'm going to lose my freaking mind because as a head coach, even in my role, in my day job, if I'm unprepared, I'm unsuccessful regardless. Like that's just a fact of the matter. If you're not prepared, you're not achieving shit that day. How the hell are you in charge of a 53-man roster with a whole plethora of coaches on your staff? And how are you guys not prepared to take on your opponent? How are you not prepared to tackle your opponent? How are you not prepared to adjust against your opponent? Like, how long have we been hearing about this? I feel like it's been since the Super Bowl. It's been, hey, the guys are not prepared. That's on me. Like, at some point, something's got to give. Like, if they're unprepared, dude, lose your freaking job at this point.
Yes. No, it is absolutely the classic argument. And this is, I think the whole point is how much money do you make and what do you do? Because if they're unprepared, and Brian, you've nailed it because I've heard that one, too many times. If they're unprepared, then what is it that you do between the last time you played and the next time you played? And is the bye week to that point going to matter? Because is there any preparation? Is basically what is the team, the players, and what the scheme is? Or is it? Are those players playing to the scheme, or are they playing against the scheme and kind of doing what they want to do? I think you can probably argue a little bit towards that with the defense and maybe, Darius over there. But I do think
it's not even his name at this point. It's just like, it's,
who I meant. Damn well who I mean.
He doesn't even deserve Darius. Now he's Darius. Going to be Darius by the time the next game starts.
He's the second best Darius because the first best Darius was Darius Rucker. So there. Anyway, back to the point. If there's no preparation, then you're right, Brian. He does need to go. But the thing is, that falls on the coordinators as well because they can still prep. So now I'm backpedaling on what my preseason idea was of if Sirianni does go, what do you do with Moore? Well, he stays the coordinator, big dog. I would give him one more season as a coordinator and allow him to be able to craft the route trees on his own instead of being influenced by the Sirianni, because we know there's an influence from Sirianni.
Yes, and I would like to see an actual a mixture of if they got rid of Sirianni and they kept Kellen Moore, I would like to see Ben Johnson and Kellen Moore do some magic because
Ben Johnson don't have that magic.
That would be kind of crafty
out right now,
and that would make a lot of sense. Like you have I just feel like that we will actually see the potential of this offense as opposed to what we're rarely seeing right now, where the coaches like what are they doing to practice like. How are you unprepared? This blows my mind. How are you unprepared?
By the way, for this point and for your entire argument last season, Brian ended up being absolutely right. It had nothing to do with Ben Johnson or Brian. I'm sorry, not Ben Johnson, Brian Johnson. As much as I, sat there and said Brian Johnson, is an awful coordinator, dude. He's turned Washington around. Washington is leading the division right now, 3-1. I don't care who they play because we're 2-2 and we're tied in third. It's the way I look at it. I don't think we're tied for a second because we were sitting here talking about, Dallas looks rough. When have we looked better?
That's fair.
We haven't scored a point in the first quarter yet.
That's fair. And speaking of Dallas, right? I'm not gonna have much say on this because to me, like, it's the day and age we live in, right? But you brought up Darius. He was actually on the Micah Parsons podcast, and
you can say Darius for that.
It was a weird moment, right? Because Micah brought up the little feud that he's having with CJ, and Darius kind of like went with it, like, yeah, he can act like that sometimes. And I'm like, is this Philly? Because Malcolm Jenkins wouldn't be on that podcast to begin with, and Malcolm Jenkins wouldn't be throwing Rodney McLeod under the bus at all. Like, what are we seeing out here?
There's no connection. As far as not none, but there are in big parts where it matters, like captains of the team. There's a loss in connection. He should not be a captain. And to me, that was based on last year because he went right to the sideline and jumped right on Twitter at the time, not X, and made his feelings felt. And then you're darn right. Trey Thomas did roast him. Absolutely. Like, as deserved too. Stop caring what people think about the about what you're going to say on the internet, because the thing is, we just want to see it on the field. Now, exactly. If he's already checked out and he wants to be a media man, then please quit now. Quit now, so there can be a corner that learns this season, and this season has purpose. Because the losses right now are coming with, and by the end of the season, there could be some purpose to it.
And I get it, right? Like, I wouldn't go to Zach's job and tell Zach how to do his job. At the end of the day, like, that's Zach's craft. Like, that's what he does best, right? But at the same time, like, you can't run on Twitter after you lose a game and give up your stats. Like, what are we? Like, what are we doing?
I agree with that 100%. I've given CJGJ a lot of garbage for it because I don't like when players talk and they're not performing up to standard. He had one okay game. And it was when the defense collectively was pretty sweet against New Orleans. But Richie nailed it, man. Sidney Brown, dude, like, if he's coming back soon, I can't wait. I cannot wait.
Vic Fangio mentioned today that, emotionally and mentally he's prepared, but they just want to make sure he's prepared physically after the bye. But that kid is a stud. And as opposed to a lot of the guys in the secondary, not talking about Quinion Mitchell, because Quinion Mitchell is a stud of all studs. Sidney Brown is a short tackler, as opposed to what we're seeing right now, where these guys are tackling like me pressing a square button on Madden. Like, they're just completely missing and sliding across the field. Like, this is terrible what we are witnessing from the defense. Zach spoke about the pass rush and how disgusting that has been. My question is, coming out of the bye, Could the Eagles benefit from a little switching of like, hey, rotate defensive line rotation where they're moving guys in and out to keep them fresh, or things of that sort, or even hey, activate Devin White and rotate the linebackers because N'Kobe Dean, I think he's in double digits in missed tackles alone.
Devin White's not playing for this team. I
Which
can't
is a
see,
huge
especially
question mark.
after. I mean, you talk about guys with social media snafus this past season or this past week, I should say. Like, you can't be out there retweeting, and I don't care if you just meant to like it or what. You can't be out there retweeting the opposition tackling your guys like that. It can't happen, you know. And between him and the other activities that were happening on social media, and the one guy's got a C on his chest, and I can't fathom that. You know, you need to find a change of character in the locker room, and I'm not really sure how you do that because your biggest guy with Bark doesn't really have a whole lot of bite these days, and Brandon Graham can't do it by himself. You know, Jordan Davis is not that kind of guy. I know that not just from what I've seen on the field, but talking to guys behind the scenes. That's not his personality. Jalen Carter is. He can become that guy, but he's still so young. You're not really going to have him doing that in year 2 necessarily. So who else do you look at? Is that Josh Sweat? That's not really Josh Sweat. Nolan Smith's not doing it. Who's doing it? Who is the guy?
What is Nolan Smith doing?
He is pretending to be in coverage. Last I saw, like that. There's not a single guy who can, again, outside of Brandon Graham. Which why hasn't he, you know, or why hasn't it worked? Who can go out there and, you know, say, cut, like straight up, cut the shit. This is it. It's done. We don't do this. You're done with it. If you want to keep doing that, you do that, but you don't do that here. Right. So if you want to go take your stuff and go elsewhere and do that, go ahead, but not here. Does not happen here in Philadelphia. So you're going to need somebody to have that moment. And I'm sure that there was, whether it was a players only, which you know, who knows with all these meetings and what Sirianni's role really is, you know, if they've already had players onlys, but you know, you need that conversation to happen with the defensive group, right? The offense has plenty of problems. I get that. With the defense, it's a hard issue as much as it is a talent issue. That's my biggest problem there. So it's going to need a real awakening for any meaningful change to happen for the rest of the season.
Ironically, the one that's not all about talk is the one producing, as you nailed it, Brandon Graham.
So where do we go from here? Eagles are 2-2. They have a bye at the most crucial time of the season. They can turn it around, right? They can come back. They can light it up. They can shut us all up. At the end of the day, I don't know what this team's going to end up with. I mean, if they reach the playoffs, cool. But to me, you wasted a season of Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and especially Saquon Barkley. Defensively, how are we allowing this to be a thing still? Like, do other teams in the league like have bad defenses so many years in a row? Is that even a thing? Like these guys are literally getting paid to not do their job at the end of the day.
Philadelphia is hoping they can outscore and pace the game and outpace the opponent. But that also takes execution on offense and really and adjustments based on what your personnel is. We haven't seen that out of Philadelphia for the most part. So yeah, I mean, and until you can kind of make those adjustments, then you know you're not going to win with a defense like this. That's a bend but don't break, even though they're breaking. This is what we're seeing them break. They've only bent and not broken against New Orleans, but besides that, they've broken big plays. By the way, if Sirianni's so focused on stopping the big play, there's been a ton of big plays. So to have a defense like that, and you're hoping to outscore and pace the game on offense, and that's not happening clearly because there's no first quarter points.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know what else to say. I feel like we really vented about it, right? The blame game is literally just all of us standing in a circle going like this right now because we don't know
I got one for Chris down there.
Uh-oh.
Wouldn't he says wouldn't that require scoring in the first quarter? For pretty much in a nutshell. You could score in the first quarter, by the way, but you would have to rely on your kicker sometimes. It sounds small, but momentum gets a hold of the game when you can sit there and say, okay, the team goes up 10-0. 10-3 looks a lot better because you're 7 points away. That's still one possession. It's not two possession. When you get swallowed whole like that and you're not putting points on the board because you're being over aggressive and you're not converting every once in a while or whatever it may be, the momentum is so huge in football that you're not putting your offense in a way to succeed. And I think that's a big part of what I have an issue with the season so far. The offense hasn't been in a place to succeed, and they've pretty much have been a success as far as the defense has allowed them to. And that's even when the team's healthy. Healthy with AJ Brown and Lane Johnson and Devonta Smith. Those weapons. Green Bay, granted it's week 1, there was a lot of sloppy football on both sides, but you have to score how many points? Well into the 20s, even 30s maybe, I think it was what we scored to win that game. And now you're sitting there going, man, it was a battle every step of the way. How can we get this defense to play? And your success relies on if the defense is on or not. You can't outplay and outthrow and just outskill a defense right now based on the offensive personnel. And so it's time to make adjustments. And we're sitting here playing like we're playing, it is. Philadelphia is playing games like going out there with the state of mind of, oh, we have a healthy personnel. You kind of have to accept that you don't and switch it up a bit.
I just feel like somebody in that organization has to have some type of pride, because right now it doesn't seem like anybody has enough pride to stand up for what we believe is Philadelphia Eagles football, what we believe is championship football, and what we believe is an actual contender. Because a lot of us came into the season thinking, hey, we got the missing piece in Saquon Barkley. This offense is gonna boom. This offense has been a bust, except for Saquon, who has over 100 yards, all-purpose yards, I think, in the first 4 games of the season. He's been the entire offense. I think he's only the second player in the franchise history to do so since 1965, if I'm not mistaken. Outside of that, like, somebody's got to step up and have some pride. I'm tired of it. Like, it's great to be talking about the Eagles, but it's not great when they're not doing well. And this is a joke at the moment. So we're at the 47-minute mark. Any last thoughts?
Just can't be a team that's going to compete for anything worthwhile if the defense is completely healthy and losing, granted, star players on offense is going to be your kryptonite, because this defense has to figure out a way to execute. If it's coach hires based on what Sirianni wants out of his coordinators, or if it's a lack of preparation because the coordinators aren't doing their jobs either, I have a hard time believing that all of this is on the personnel that you see on the field. Even though there is a complete lack of focus, obviously, and there's a lot more talk than production, I think the problem is greater than the personnel that's on the field. And that's the worrying part. This might be a team that, has a lot of parts on it, but is going through like a rebuild. And it might happen sooner than we think.
What do you think, Zach? Any final thoughts?
I'm tired, man. I am tired of talking about this. I'm tired of talking about the issue that we all know is there and not going away. I need to see change. I need to see something change. And if it's on the field, I hope that's where it is. I don't think that's the most likely spot. If nothing else is changing, how are you going to have change on the field? But there needs to be change. There needs to be philosophical change in ownership, change in Howie, change in the coaching staff, in the hearts of these players, man. Like there needs to be change because on virtually all fronts, this has not been good enough. And if guys are sitting back on this bye week and treating it like a vacation, it's the season's already over, man. Like there's not a redeeming way to come back from that. And so I don't feel great. I think this team is still based on their personnel. Like AJ Brown's coming back. I get that. Devontae Smith's coming back. I get that. I think this is still a playoff team. But what is the point if we're not talking about a championship? And that's where I'm at with this team.
It's not on the stars that are hurt. I'm sure they are burning to be back on the field, but I do question not everyone. Like I'm sure Hurts wants it, right? I'm sure it's just it's his season. By the way, when we get frustrated with the turnovers, I understand that. But somebody put out a graphic earlier. I don't know who to credit on Twitter. So maybe you guys have seen it, where they compared Hurts' start this season to Mahomes, and Hurts was actually better.
Yeah.
Did you
I
see
don't
that?
give a shit. I'll be flat honest with you.
No, well, I
Other people
wasn't.
have
Yeah,
said that, and I'm not. We're not talking about Kansas City. We're not. And I hear what you're saying. Like my thing is like, if I cared about Kansas City, I'd be ripping Mahomes too. That's where I'm at
well,
with that.
that
Like this
wasn't
is
where I was necessarily going with that. I was just saying that I think Hurts wants it, but there's players on this team who do not want it as much as the Philadelphia market and the fan base. And until that changes, until the team wants it like Philadelphia does, they ain't competing.
And Jalen alluded to that towards the end of the last season, where it was kind of like, we all gotta want it as a team. Josh Sweat mentioned things about that as well, and it's like we're not seeing them like, and I hate to keep beating a dead horse, right? But it's like going back to Darius Slay. Darius Slay may have embraced the idea of Philadelphia, of playing football in Philadelphia, but you haven't embraced Philly, and Philly is a very nose to the pavement grind. Like you hustle. You get paid to do what you do, right? But you do it to the best of your ability at the end of the day. And that's what they expect, because that's what they give 110% of every day. And then they pay that money, they spend that money that they earn to watch you play and to watch you play half-ass football. And that's what these players need to be held accountable about, is that they're playing half-ass football. Bryce Huff, you had all off season, all training camp to get prepared for this role. Yeah, you might be out of position, but you're getting paid pretty good money to get into position. Darius Slay, you've been here. It's disappointing to see a captain have the antics that he's had outside of off the field. But I completely agree with you. Like this whole team has to want it, and they're not going to get anywhere with just a handful of players wanting it.
there's different levels of wanting it. I agree with what you're saying there, Eric. I think that let's talk about just Jalen Hurts. Let's just go in order operations here. I think that Jalen Hurts wants it. My question for the guys who want it but are not adjusting: do you want it bad enough to make the necessary changes?
Right.
That's my question. That's my question for guys like Jalen Hurts. That's my question for guys like Nick Sirianni. That's my question for anybody who has shown that they give a damn. Guys like Jalen Hurts have shown quality leadership issues. Again, Jalen Hurts. But do you want it bad enough that you're willing to go out of your comfort zone and make the adjustments necessary to get it? Or do you just want the idea of it? And when you're talking about the guys who don't even want the idea of it, don't even care about that, that's when we're talking about Darius Slay. Feel free to block me on Twitter like you have about a half other people in Philadelphia media this past week. But we're talking about guys like Darius Slay. It's where we're talking about his teammate who he was openly mocking this week, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. That's where we're talking about Bryce Huff, who I'm not even going to use the E word as some kind of joke, because it's not a joke. This is not funny. We have moved past the point where it's funny. but you are just hemorrhaging cap space for this team at this point, and opportunity as well. Opportunity for guys, and Nolan Smith is not seizing these, but it's opportunities for guys to be able to seize those opportunities.
Where's
to
Jay
increase
Licks?
their future paychecks. Jalix Hunt, great example. Like, you're taking away their opportunities while also decreasing the team's chance of winning these games. So you can sit there and tell me that you want to win, that you want to win it all, but if you're not showing me even an ounce of that, that's falling on deaf ears. So in order for me to start believing you, I need to see that change in you. I need to see that you actually want it. Don't tell me, show me.
That's it.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's I feel like that's the best way to end on a good note, right? Eagles are on a bye this week, so we're not having a Saturday episode. I think the guys and us, myself, can actually take a rest from this. But we'll be back on Tuesday to recap any news, and then the Saturday after that to preview the Eagles-Browns game. But until then, I mean, it's gonna be an interesting bye. That's the best way to put it. So yeah, thank you guys for joining us. If you are on YouTube, be sure to hit the thumbs up button. Make sure you like this video. We appreciate you all for joining us. It's been a great support system for us for over the last year and a half. So we appreciate you all. And then yeah, until next week.
All right, man. Go Birds.
Yes, sir.
Flipping the Birds.